You just woke up one day and he was everywhere. You turn on the TV and there he is on the morning news.
Beloved actor, Morgan Freeman, has died.
That's horrible.
It is.
On your commute to work, you'd see him again on the side of the road dressed like Spider-Man begging for your money. It's Casual Friday and all your coworkers are wearing t-shirts with his famous catchphrase.
Get in there! Get in there!
You go into the break room and there he is again with some diagrams to show you.
It's my anus.
Maybe after work you arrange a meeting to pick up felony quantities of controlled pharmaceuticals and he pulls up in a bright yellow Hummer.
It's me.
You convince yourself that you were just imagining things. You weren't. It was Mark Proksch. I know, because I saw him too. If none of that sounds familiar, then I may be getting confused with this weird dream that I've been having ever since I went to this crazy company. But even if you clicked on this thinking, who the hell is Mark Proksch, I'm betting that you've seen him.
You probably know me.
You may have forgivably sort of written him off as the funny-voiced deadpan guy that keeps getting typecast as similar characters.
If I ever put anything on a gravestone, I always played characters with pleated pants.
And thought there's nothing more to it.
You're so stupid. There is.
You know, there's certain roles where you just think, yeah, no one else could play this character. To me, Mark Proksch's Colin Robinson is near the top of that list. Because the more you become familiar with his career, the more Colin Robinson feels almost inevitable. Mark went deeper and deeper into reinforcing one very specific comedic and emotional language for almost 2 decades.
Our unique fingerprint of anal terrain.
Anus.
Or anus.
And Colin Robinson is written in that language, not just written to speak it. Everything that made that character work so well and made it so popular was already fully formed back in 2010, before anyone knew who he was, at the time of his hysterically mischievous first appearances. And it's all become one of my absolute favorite stories in comedy.
Live from Rockford's news leader, this is 13 News Today.
Well, you probably owned a yo-yo as a kid, but our next guest has turned it into an art form and now is using it for a good cause. We'll talk to him coming up.
He's an award-winning and master yo-yoist.
He is a master yo-yoist.
And I'm here with a big-time yo-yo champion.
We all know how important it is to be green and environmentally friendly, but how do you get your kids interested in this?
Well, yo-yo master Strasser has an idea. He's visiting Madison schools this week. How do you combine going green with the yo-yo?
Broadly, the idea was to, just for a laugh, go on local morning news shows claiming to be a yo-yo master that goes around to local schools using yo-yos to teach children about the environment.
The kids love it, and a lot of times we'll be laughing so hard we don't even get to the environmental stuff.
Something that could only work in a town sleepy enough to where local news stations would be so desperate for interesting features that they would forgo any and all due diligence or basic research.
These poor stations, I mean, what can you talk about for 2.5 hours in St. Joseph every day?
Such as, say, if someone wanted to come on the show claiming to be a yo-yo master who had been nominated for a Walt Greenberg Award in yo-yo tricks and was now sponsored by a green nonprofit yo-yo company.
These yo-yos are great for the environment. Not so great for yo-yos.
Maybe quickly confirming that he can yo-yo at all, calling up a school or two, checking if Zim Zam Yo-Yo is a real company or who Walt Greenberg is and whether there's really a yo-yo award named after him. Whatever. Lucky for Mark and for the entire internet, they did no such vetting. I do believe the yo-yo has long been one of humanity's greatest educational tools, so I take no issue with that aspect. But obviously the hosts of the show were expecting at least some basic yo-yo skills.
I can only imagine how often you have to practice to be this good.
But Mark had other plans.
I get a little bit of flack for it because it's not like right away, it's not your typical yo-yoing because I'm just twirling it, but oops, lost one. See, you have the up and down.
Okay.
Okay, pretty basic.
And then
Oh,
you're right.
yeah. Okay, let's see it.
How long have you been practicing yo-yo?
What I say is, life has a lot of ups and downs, and
And it certainly does.
Effectively making things very awkward and deflating the whole premise live on air. On some appearances going beyond messing up his tricks by refusing to do any in the first place, because his yo-yo had just been greased.
I had this greased yesterday, and so it takes about 48 for it to set.
Oh, so there's like there's really a maintenance you have to do with your yo-yos.
There's upkeep.
Okay, we had a little miscommunication, so we're not going to get a lesson, but that's all right.
And then proceeding to describe the yo-yo tricks he would have done were he to have known in advance that he was expected to do any.
I shoot out with the left hand first, and I'm not yo-yoing, but I'm whirling them.
Okay.
Or even basically announcing he was quitting the yo-yo altogether.
I think I'm going to give up some of the yo-yo stuff because I don't have the muscle memory.
You know, the whole reason he was booked on this show in the first place. shattering his credibility in an instant. Like, they brought this man on to demonstrate yo-yo tricks and talk about how much he cares about the environment and children and his work with kids at schools. And as soon as he comes on, he starts telling them about how he's only been to one school so far.
I'll be honest, it didn't go so hot.
And that it was a disaster because the kids didn't want to listen because their parents aren't spanking them, and how he's mad that his yo-yo company is dropping him. I still cry laughing every time I watch these. And I'm not alone, because thanks to the internet, these appearances went far beyond local Midwest broadcast.
The writers of The Office loved it. So they created Nate, the character Nate, kind of out of my K-Strass appearances. About a month later, I was on the show.
So just like that, Mark jumped straight from pranking local news stations to being cast in the final 3 seasons of The Office.
The Magic 3. The Holy Trinity.
And old Hollywood Mark Proksch was off to the races after that.
My head is constantly itching.
Hello. Your topographical anal handshake.
That guy's process is clearly working well. Got a great kind of alpha male energy.
My name is Mr. Dinkler, and I will be taking over this science
The map of the baboon. Stinky fish. Some small birds can be considered insects.
Alrighty then.
Large insects can be considered like a bird.
2 torpedoes took us down.
I just feel really fortunate to have sort of danced these dances that we've had.
Damn it!
Todd Man, 1B2.
This guy's a great actor, you know.
And as you know.
Luckily, the right people got it. Like known alt comedy fan Vince Gilligan brilliantly cast him in his own deceptively humorous universe to play a socially awkward Midwestern simpleton that commands no respect, annoys everyone around him, and is reliably terrible at the one thing he's there to do. And even before that, at a certain point, Tim and Eric and Absolutely Productions were apparently even working on developing a TV show based on his yo-yo character, Kenny Strasser. You know, the socially awkward Midwestern simpleton that commands no respect, annoys everyone around him, and is reliably terrible at the one thing he's there to do.
Oh.
Which sadly never happened, and that is a
true tragedy.
But more importantly to me, eventually led to my favorite role of his when Tim Heidecker and Greg Turkington cast him as a vitally important part of the best comedy show out there, full stop.
It's on cinema at the cinema with me,
a
your
show
host,
that I'm
Tim Heidecker.
obsessed with.
A brilliantly funny universe still going strong to this day, and over more than a decade has become one of the most hysterically funny and tragic character pieces I can think of, in which he plays a version of himself that's sort of a socially awkward Midwestern simpleton that commands no respect, annoys everyone around him, and is reliably terrible at the one thing he's there to do. Well, there's more to it than that, but there's a good reason that these viral morning show stunts led to a rare kind of acting career. It wasn't just, haha, this guy said he was good at yo-yo, but no how yo-yo. Or haha, look at these small town anchors getting fooled. Instead, taking full advantage of what amounts to very minimal screen time, Mark managed to present a fully formed identity. So vivid, so compelling, and so goddamn funny that his career then played out as a long exploration of the same elements already there from the start, with different creators utilizing them in different ways, which leaves you with remarkable thematic consistency across all of his characters, despite most of them existing as supporting players in different universes. And it all started with that Midwestern morning show yo-yo spanking humiliation tour, which incidentally is my top search on Cornhub. A discussion which must necessarily start with the fan favorite sentence, to understand that, we need to go back to the beginning. And now that I said that cool thing, know you're in good hands, because I am an expert or a buff of sorts, and I have researched this topic thoroughly in exhaustive detail. For example, I know from Wikipedia that Mark was born in 1978 or 1979. There's really no way to tell, and no one knows for sure. By the way, Wikipedia is not a sponsor. I just think it's a great product, and it's a great resource to find all sorts of great information about comedians right here on the web.
What year did the Challenger explode?
When did Schubert Dip come out?
So check out wikipedia.com. I do recommend their service. That's www.wikipedia.com. Back to the video. Wikipedia also states that while he was born sometime in the late 70s, he was only active from 2007 to now. So for 29 or 28 years, I guess he was laying dormant in artificial utero, probably in some kind of incubation tube filled with some kind of viscous organic matter preserving fluid or goo. His brain hooked up to wires feeding him images of HR training VHS tapes and W.C. Fields movies, where all he could hear was the monotone voices of Wisconsin's top scientists speaking to him and corn feeding him corn nutrients until finally activating him in 2007. At which point he emerged from his cocoon, yo-yo in hand, a 6-foot-tall, bald alternative comedian with supernatural powers for causing and enduring humiliation.
Oh.
Whether this theory is true or whether he, as he claims, grew up the old-fashioned way in Wisconsin as a regular lower-middle-class child with a bunch of older brothers, encountering very little goo. And to be fair, he is a famously honest person.
I'll be honest.
I'll be honest.
I'll be honest.
I'll be honest.
Honestly,
I'll be honest.
honestly,
I'll be honest.
honestly,
I'll be honest.
Honestly.
I'll be honest.
Honestly.
I'll be honest with you.
His Midwestern upbringing seems to have been the very thing to make his career possible.
You come from Wisconsin.
I grew up in the Midwest. I lived out there for quite some time and had a lot of fun.
I come from a home that believed in spanking.
I grew up in the Midwest.
My research has uncovered that he is indeed from Wisconsin. Obviously, just on an idiosyncratic level, a lot of what makes almost anything he does funny is his affect, thick accent, which would all be some combination of nature and Midwestern nurture.
I had a funny voice, which I guess, Midwest voice.
To the point that he apparently auditioned for season 1 of Fargo, a show which features dialogue and accents like this.
You don't have the sense God gave a clam, do ya?
And was told to tone it down.
I was just doing my normal voice. I never got called back for Fargo.
Also, due to his specific upbringing, his sense of humor developed in perfect harmony with his already naturally funny demeanor.
I come from a funny Midwest family, grandparents, everyone.
My family is very dry, as are a lot of the friends I grew up with.
Which I actually think is super important to that authenticity I mentioned. All that to say, he isn't just doing some goofy Midwestern character because he figured out that it could get laughs.
For effect.
He was born in it.
Molded by it.
So that comedic language I mentioned, every part of it is personal to him, including the inspiration for his characters.
I like playing the weirdos, schlubby, kind of annoying, because that's who I enjoy in real life.
Is really born out of the Midwest. There were a lot of people like Pryce from Better Call Saul or Nate from The Office. There's these odd, eccentric people in the Midwest. I would really latch on to these characters and talk to them and stuff like that. I've learned to mine that for all it's worth. Eventually, I just started doing this one character, and it came to be Kenny.
His talent being a product of his cultural and geographical circumstances, so too was his entire career. In fact, were he to have left Wisconsin and moved to LA to try and be an actor, you may have never heard of him. Because what do we know about Wisconsin? Doing bike tricks is illegal and punishable by death, and sometimes people feel the need to entertain themselves in creative ways. A cruel irony. So naturally, a young man with such a potent comedic power as Mark would need to get creative to find a satisfying enough outlet for it.
There's just not much right now in Wisconsin for entertainers.
And so he pulled off something that could only be possible by someone sipping the perfect cocktail of boredom, brilliance, and shamelessness, with equally bored and creative friends to scheme with.
We sent out 10 press releases throughout the Midwest. We got 7 responses back saying, sure, we'd love to have the yo-yo expert on our show. Like, it actually worked.
Initially, this was all intended as a psychotically high-effort in-joke and not much more.
The idea of going on a morning show, so much of it comes out of boredom. We thought, well, why don't we just go on there with the most ridiculous idea and see if we can make our friends laugh.
Which gets at that authentic thing again, because this wasn't some cynical stunt to get famous, but instead just a crazy guy with huge balls goofing around for a very elaborate laugh. A near psychotic commitment to the bit, and doing it for the right reasons. Because it's funny. And because apparently that's what you gotta do in Wisconsin. In fact, the friends Mark planned this whole thing with, Nick Pruer,
I can't keep doing these names,
and Joe Pickett, have continued to do amazing stuff.
Strongman duo Chop and Steel are here. 2, 3.
It's a little big.
3, 4. Okay.
They ended up pulling a bunch more morning show pranks for the found footage touring show that they run and making a documentary about a resulting lawsuit against them hailed as the dumbest First Amendment battle of 2017. That's a whole other video. We're talking Mark Proksch.
Proksch.
I'm sorry, Mr. Proksch.
I think that's what I love most about his career, because in no way was he trying to break into the industry.
I had no inkling that that could lead to a career in Hollywood.
The industry quickly realized what a secret weapon he was.
He has the best dumb guy impression in the world.
Oh. That simple authenticity and full commitment to ultra deadpan sincerity.
I've been all around doing my yo-yo tricks.
Also lends a kind of endearing quality that makes the purposefully trollish, dull, or irritating aspects of his act not only palatable, but hysterical and addicting. Exceedingly rare to be able to pull off in the way that he does. Because a major aspect of his sense of humor comes from creating uncomfortable environments in a myriad of ways. He bores the shit out of the newscasters with a detailed accounting of the minutia of the logistics of checking into schools as a yo-yo performer.
First thing you need to do is stop at the office, sign in, get a badge.
As if that were somehow an appropriate use of his airtime, or, of any interest to anyone, leading people to pity him or shudder from secondhand embarrassment.
Hey, they're up in the sky. It's the K-Strass, the yo-yo guy.
A big one along those lines is that he clearly loves trolling people with jokes that purposefully fall flat to see how they react.
Remember when baby Jessica fell down that well in Texas? Well, if they had some yo-yos, all they would have had to do was reach down,
grab her,
and grab her out.
Fishing for someone to uncomfortably fake a laugh in the moment in exchange for real laughter later. And he commits to character so much that there's never any part of him reassuring people that he's not actually a freak.
Spanking.
Leaving those around him unsure whether to laugh, help him, or get up and leave.
Boy, oh boy, we're going to submit this one for an Emmy.
On one appearance, he keeps answering phone calls from his dad, who's for some reason calling him just to tell him he loves him a bunch of times.
I'm not going to go. It's my dad. Hi.
We're dealing with some issues this morning,
Yep.
so we will actually just head that back to Jeff and Bow, and we'll be joining you a bit more with some of these yo-yo tricks coming up.
And just look how shocked and thrown off the interviewer is, and how quickly the anchor jumps in to explain it away to something that wouldn't make the station look unprofessional.
Kenny is dealing with some personal issues this morning, so anybody else gets yelled at for having the cell phone in the studio, but Kenny had to have his on for some personal reasons.
I don't buy it, but A for effort, this guy's good at his job. It feels like the core of what Mark and his friends found so funny about it was simply confusing the shit out of people.
We always picture farmers sitting at home thinking, what the hell is going on? Dear, come here.
With the morning shows, he's actually pranking real, unsuspecting people with this annoying and bewildering behavior and seeing how they react.
I have a feeling we're going to be seeing this somewhere down the road, Larry. We're going to be part of some documentary or something.
But he's made the exact same behavior into a successful career. Except instead of doing it to random newscasters, he's doing it to other characters played by some of the funniest comedic actors and improvisers in the world, reacting to what he throws at them. His talents for being annoying in a funny and palatable way were proven as Kenny. Proof of concept for what fertile ground there is with how committedly, convincingly bothersome he is.
You have honed an ability to play someone who is incredibly boring and annoying.
So imagine the possibilities for a showrunner or writer to bring that same character into an ensemble comedy and used all the same tricks on the characters around him in that world.
A lot of noises.
Nate! Please. Thank you.
And you can see why this is so central to his career. I'll say it again, it speaks to that authenticity, because so many of these things that Mark himself clearly finds so funny consistently make it into his other characters, despite mostly being written by other people. Rather than getting hired to play some part where he's trying to replicate something someone else finds funny, he's so often in various characters doing all the same shit that made him laugh his head off just for shits and gigs back in Wisconsin with his friends. For example, Kenny keeps making these newscasters uncomfortable by telling them a bunch of irrelevant stuff about his family, and most of his characters also have quite a knack for making interactions deeply weird by oversharing to the max about personal details.
When I was younger, my stepdad and I used to wrestle a lot, just between guys, just fun.
I ended up kissing a guy once.
Oh, that's perfect. That's exactly what this is for.
Did you say you ended up kissing a guy?
Once.
Why are they disclosing so much about their private life?
And just as Kenny frustrates the newscasters by answering phone calls about how much his dad loves him at the most inappropriate times, Mark's other characters often also demonstrate an infuriating inability to read the room.
I saw this show, a lineup of lineups on it. All these people were on the bill. Rufus Wainwright comes out. Honestly, one of the most moving sets you could imagine. So that's who Mark has to follow. Mark comes up, immediately belittled him. You acted like I have to win the audience back now. You're inferring that that was just bad.
He bombed.
Everybody's crying from the beauty of the thing. It was so funny.
And so often his characters, in being so unable to read those rooms, have a similar aptitude for sucking all of the air out of them by going on and on and on with boring topics that no one would have any earthly reason to care about.
I brought us the refreshments. I did get these at Staples. Funny story about how I got these. I had to get the toner for my printer. The toner's in the closeout section. These were in that closeout section. They were free because
the torrent of badly delivered, ill-advised jokes that die on their ass is everywhere too.
Give a monkey a banana and he'll
eat it?
Stick it up his butt.
Tri-zone climate control. Girl in a bikini, another in a parka, both going to be comfortable.
join us. It's Chablis grape time.
What should the movie be about? Well, I recommend that it's about 100 minutes.
But if you were just constantly playing the annoying guy, I don't think this would work as well as it does. Because really, the whole troll thing is really just the surface. And it too goes all the way back to the stupid yo-yo guy. Because in the videos, the joke isn't really on the anchors. Well, it's inevitably gonna mess with them, but the joke is pretty clearly on Mark's character. Because he's absolutely humiliating himself, which is where the biggest laughs are for me. Like everything to do with his performance surrounding screwing these tricks up so embarrassingly badly. Especially this panicky whisper thing that he keeps doing where he'll talk to the anchors under his his breath.
One of our favorite things is for Kenny to say stuff when he thinks the mic's not on.
Like at one point, of course, he hits himself with a yo-yo and pleads with the anchors to show a clip of him doing tricks instead of doing it live.
You know what? Do you have a clip?
A clip?
Did Joe send a clip over?
Or my absolute favorite, when he builds up to this big trick involving a bunch of yo-yos.
I act like I'm in a Blue Angel.
Okay.
So I say, air traffic control, we are ready for takeoff. All right, 10-4, guys, let's roll.
And then he screws up and starts worriedly appealing to the poor host for help and asking him what he should do.
Let's take it down to the ground and we'll get into a Huey. And we get going. Oops. What should I do?
Oh, the delivery of that line is just ridiculously funny.
What should I do?
I actually cannot hear that without laughing.
What should I do?
I don't know how he could possibly get through throwing this line away with such a straight face and then continuing to clumsily spin yo-yos around his head like it's his first day of circus camp.
Bring it back home for a clean landing. 10-4. What should I do?
You okay?
He so perfectly conveys this sweetly helpless, embarrassed idiot kind of panicking and whispering for guidance as if A, no one could hear him, or B, there was any way to salvage this. Like, what is this anchor guy gonna do? He's already tripping over himself on live TV wearing suspenders, doing raps about toys, and tangling himself up in yo-yo strings.
What should I do?
What should you do? You should stop going on TV to do yo-yo tricks if you don't know how to yo-yo. His characters failing and embarrassing themselves is maybe the biggest through line in his career. In 2013, he made a pilot for another morning show-based series, this time entirely fictional with himself as the host. And his character definitely has all of the irksome traits we've come to know. Actually, probably the worst of all, because this version's actually a really negative dickhead to everyone, which is a hilarious escalation.
I want that bitch gone!
It's not your fault.
But the shame is pretty much all on him.
Toby's pie pranks! Don't be mad! It's Toby's pie prank!
He's trying to run a morning show, but making baffling and embarrassing choices and mistakes at every turn. Like oversharing about his divorce and his confusing homosexual experiences, or especially when he accidentally shows a video of himself naked rooting around in his ass for some kind of exam.
That's a solid footage. Some of them...
Damn it! Why are you... The guys upstairs put this goddamn thing on. They found it. Jason, get on this! It's when I was doing my examination.
Not sure what kind of exam that would be, but definitely the most extreme is his character in On Cinema, to the point that the pathetic embarrassment aspect takes center stage over the annoying social miscues, which is also still very much in play. He's an entertainer that couldn't entertain a lab with 100 tennis balls, and couldn't hold a conversation with 100 tennis balls. This character almost never says or does anything without embarrassing himself. He's profoundly incompetent. He's an impressionist that specializes in impersonating W.C. Fields and can't even do that one right.
Godfrey Daniels. I'm W.C. Fields. And I'm Get him the f*** out of here!
But inevitably lets every other impression he tries slip back into sounding identical to that same impression that was bad in the first place.
One of the things that you should probably know is
Sounds
that
like W.C. Field.
the Algonquin Round Table.
Here he goes again, slipping into Fields.
And he's awkward to the point of nausea. Interestingly, the joke isn't just on Mark's characters, but in some ways on Mark himself for his self-destructive willingness to commit so hard to characters that are humiliating themselves. Even people he knows don't always know if he's in character or not.
I feel like you fuck with my mind sometimes. You're so good at keeping it grounded, which is hard for comedians to do.
This man is not concerned with protecting his dignity, and thank God for that.
We can't not talk about the squat cobblers. Jimmy and Pryce make a video.
Fetish videos. He sits in a pie. There's tears.
This video might actually exist.
Thank you,
This
Mr.
video
Proksch.
might actually exist.
Mark Proksch is the greatest sport of them all.
If it's funny, and I really think it's funny, I have no issue doing it.
I mean, growing up in the Midwest, you know, ego is the 11th commandment that you're not supposed to have.
Once again, the best example is these morning shows, because in a situation that must feel incredibly uncomfortable, every urge in mine, and I'm guessing most people's bodies, would be to relieve some shame. Like something to signal to the crew, anchors, or the people watching the replay, like, it's okay, I'm in here, and I'm not really this impossibly pathetic and strange. Well, Mark did none of that.
If we were to kind of wink at the camera or show our hand a little bit, I think that ruins the character.
Even after the tapings, there was no, just kidding, I'm an actor, and not actually a weirdo kind of moment.
I'm in character from the moment I get in to the moment I drive away.
Just awkwardly, dejectedly gathering his stupid yo-yos and leaving the building, knowing everyone in there was either mortified, pissed, or most likely relentlessly mocking him.
Right after the interview, it's like you have the plague.
Right.
I mean, everyone just walks away. They don't want to be near you, and it's always the lowly camera person having to go up to the guy who just ruined quite possibly his life on air, or embarrassed the hell out of himself. I'm always like, oh man, that went so badly. That was so horrible. And every single time they're like, no, no.
And I have to emphasize, not for fame, but because he was bored fucking around and being a goof with his friends, which didn't really stop after he found success. He's willing to be the butt of the joke in his rapport with his friends off camera too, in comedy that was never meant for anyone else to see.
We have a very long text chain that's just a bit. We've been doing it for about 10 years. It's over 2,500 pages. We've started compiling them because they end up kind of being stories.
This isn't really the most visual topic, so if you're getting bored just listening to me or having to read, keep your eyes on the top left of the screen and I'll have something for you there. Some of these text chains have since been released, but like the Kenny thing, were initially just aimed at making each other laugh. Please keep in mind, these texts were always intended to be private. They are, in general, crude, chaotic, not safe for work, and often cross the line of good taste and common decency. They're painfully funny, and I highly recommend you seek them out and read them if you're a fan of these guys' humor at all. And almost every single one of them revolves around Tim and Greg in some way piling on and stressing Mark out with odd requests or complaints, and eventually kind of shitting on him. Generally speaking, poor Mark gets subjected to terrible ideas, dead-end opportunities, sick, perverted proposals, and schoolyard-level abuse from his so-called friends, Greg and Tim. Clearly, Mark is in on the joke, and they're all playing characters. It's part of an ongoing character bit, not a reflection of our actual personalities or relationships. We're actually very good friends in real life. A simple request for Mark to provide a 3-minute video about haircuts for a new Ken Burns documentary about the history of hair escalates to basically a picture book of naked bald men being published in Mark's name before devolving into Mark being berated mercilessly for refusing to send Ken Burns a video of himself masturbating and neglecting to show up to the book signing. Yeah, they get pretty absurd and dark. Mark occupying that role just works, even though a version of him is getting mercilessly bullied. These threads are so funny because of Mark kind of selflessly playing that role, the butt of the joke.
Do the fucking neutron dance!
Lip sync along with it so they can match that up. Maybe show your belly.
It gives the more driving personalities so much to work with and play off of. He makes everyone funnier. Tim Heidecker has said his text chains with Greg Turkington and Mark Proksch have made him laugh harder than almost anything. A lot of what's great about Marion's Wish, if you read it as an actual story, is the absurdity of what these two bullies are doing to such an undeserving person. And his confused and pitiful responses or lack thereof make their ridiculous requests and escalations work as well as they do. And this translates to how he makes everyone else funnier on screen too. The easiest comparison being On Cinema because it's the same exact dynamic. A pathetic walking embarrassment being bullied in two very different ways by two very different types of bullies that are somehow both even bigger embarrassments. And some of the funniest lines from these characters come from reacting to Mark.
Why can't you talk like a fucking pirate?
It's clear that his willingness to fill this role and his talent for it makes him really fun to collaborate with and play with for all kinds of funny people, which Marion's Wish is proof of. Even while working together on the show, they kept privately playing basically the same game they play in On Cinema, but just for the love of the game and some genuine laughs among friends. And Mark somehow continues to make that role of the really undeserving fool that gets kicked again and again but keeps going so funny and not too dark. And that's another layer, one that has also been there since the very beginning. A real emotional human layer. There's a real kind of earnestness underneath all the bothering other people and humiliating himself and his character for laughs. There's no snarky commenting because his characters have no awareness of what makes them funny. There's always some element of trying to connect with people, trying to make something of themselves. A sort of sweetly pitiful kind of emotional cocktail that I think he recognized as unique to his experience.
Coming out of a melancholy Midwest thing, desperation.
Which lends an emotional aspect to all of his characters that deepens all of it, and therefore elevates the funny parts by contrast. In one of the Kenny appearances, he talks up how Yo-Yo saved his life.
I was literally in the gutter, and it was gambling, drugs, women, lotto.
How learning the yo-yo and, quote, giving it his all was the key to turning his life around.
I was looking the Grim Reaper in his eyes.
So, like, if that's your story, surely you must be pretty good at the yo-yo. But again, here's the trick that he follows up that story with. Hilarious. But also, that this would be his backstory is sad if true, because he really is trying to replace a hard life with a positive one through yo-yo. And this is how it's going.
Oh, I think I'm going to give up some of the yo-yo stuff.
But also the fact that he would tell this story on the news in such odd detail and how much it clearly throws these people off speaks volumes.
You want to hear a scary story?
These characters are just off. It goes back to the trolling, poking, and annoying people in interactions thing. They seem to inhabit a reality that's a few degrees out of phase with everyone else's.
Have you seen Colby Jack, the kangaroo cat, yet? There's a scene in there where Lincoln is yelling at everyone, and then he turns and he says, Colby Jack, get the heck out of here, because I don't want to deal with you anymore.
Right. Well,
at the end of the day, they're all so socially inept that they only end up becoming trolls by accident.
It's really rude.
Lonely, accidental trolls, every one of them. There's no malice or even mischievousness in it. Just total mortifying sincerity as they try to connect with or impress people and fail miserably.
If they can't find them in the computer, they give them to you for free. That's their policy.
Kenny, the character, isn't trying to troll these newscasters. He's earnestly trying to impress them with his yo-yo tricks and his stories.
There are about a dozen yo-yo masters.
But because he is the way he is, he fails, and the result is the same.
Right after the interview, it's like you have the plague.
Mark Proksch's character from On Cinema isn't trying to ruin the shows he's booked on by fucking up his impressions.
I'm just doing my best.
He didn't mean for his TV pilot opportunity to turn out like this.
I had a funny sidekick named R2D2.
I died at 31.
But because he is the way he is, he fails.
How did the show turn out? I'm not all that happy about it.
And the result is the same.
Ruined quite possibly his life on air, embarrassed the hell out of himself.
Pryce in Better Call Saul is similarly just hopelessly naive. He underestimates the chasm between book smarts and street smarts.
What's the difference?
He desperately wants people to think he's cool.
Man, I'm proud of it.
Despite, everything about him. He desperately wants to have his cake and eat it too, cosplay gangster and make some money, but not be seen as a bad guy, even by other thieves, dealers, and killers. But at the end of the day, he's really a sad, stubborn dork.
I'm sorry, but this is the gravy train, and it's leaving the station.
And because of his inability to self-reflect and recognize any of this, embarrasses himself, loses his precious baseball cards, and makes life harder for the people that are actually trying to keep him from self-destructing. And the result is the same.
He sits in a pie.
Melancholy, Midwest, desperation.
Which is what brings out the final layer that I love about this picture that Mark's career overall paints. A kind of supernatural social invincibility. A real resilience and determination stemming from that
melancholy, Midwest, desperation.
Because no matter how humiliated they get, they keep going. Once again, it goes all the way back to the yo-yo debacle. This character is embarrassed and panicked, calling out to other people to save him.
Which I do.
He understands that what he's doing is a disaster and that it's not working.
It was literally a major disaster. This keeps happening to me.
I'm always like, oh man, that went so badly. That was so horrible.
He keeps doing it. He goes back to the schools, even though he knows that the kids don't like his stories and won't listen to him because their parents aren't spanking them enough.
Because they were running around?
He goes back to more morning show appearances, even though he keeps forgetting his yo-yos or breaking them mid-trick. Even after falling out of a tree and breaking all of his bones and being showed up by the Garth Brooks of yo-yo. They have an inability to self-reflect where it counts, but that doesn't mean they have a complete lack of self-awareness, because all of his characters are aware enough for the humiliation and failure to hurt, but not aware enough to figure out what's best for them. They can't see far enough to making the actual necessary changes to be happy, which in some cases would be just to quit. On Cinema, Mark is probably the best example. He's a comedy impersonator without a sense of humor whatsoever.
I died in 1961. I died in 1975. Well, I died in 1975. I died earlier than Groucho did. I died in 1975. I died in 1975.
Literally anyone would have thrown in the towel by now. Because for one, he's often the character unduly facing ironic consequences or uncalled for abuse. But more importantly, he's been trying for so long and doing nothing but failing, humiliating himself, getting hurt, and impossibly ending up in more and more depressing career positions.
Graduation parties, old folks' homes, hospice care. Hospice care, they don't even know who I am. I mean, it's...
Because they might think you were really W.C. Fields if their minds have gone, like if they have Alzheimer's.
There was this one lady that did think that.
He works for people that don't understand his abilities and what he has to offer, if anything. Which leads him to being put in performance situations that he's totally unprepared for and embarrassing himself beyond belief. Life is a constant, miserable struggle, with people taking advantage of his desperation.
I wish I could get more hours, but I also like still being a part of the entertainment industry.
His dream of being an actor cruelly confined to sad nonsense like playing the eponymous baboon in a canceled student film and having to follow up the announcement of a man's death with a Three Stooges puppet show at a budget old folks home. And it leads not only to emotional hurt, but to serious bodily harm on a near constant basis. But he just keeps trying. which again feels in line with Mark's idea of
a melancholy Midwest desperation.
Which, could be admirable, but less so after the 50th time completely shitting yourself on stage. Though somehow more and more funny, so hey. But it's not like he's oblivious. He knows enough to know when his act isn't going over well.
Bluegills and cod. I don't know. I don't know if I'm doing it right. I forgot.
Not doing it right.
He has moments where he does the same desperately looking to people off screen for help or reassurance thing that Kenny does when his yo-yo tricks are flopping.
Which I do.
Yet every opportunity that he gets, there he is again, making an ass out of himself dressed like a munchkin or something. This is the weirdly endearing factor that rounds it all out. It's very human. When people have serious goals that they care about, they'll keep trying whether it seems pointless to everyone else or not. It's why on cinema Mark keeps picking up his cane and his little hat and coming back to waddle around as Charlie Chaplin again. Because pretty much the one time he gets a real compliment on one of his impressions, he lights up like it's all worth it. It's why Kenny would have kept picking up that environmentally friendly yo-yo and going through the arduous check-in process at the local schools. Why his Good Morning Tri-State character kept trying to get people to talk to him about the movie Swordfish.
One of my favorite movies is Swordfish. Swordfish was on TNT.
Amazing
Swordfish.
hair. Swordfish. Yeah, you love that movie.
Even why the version of himself from Marion's Wish finally agreed to send his very mean and bossy friends a naked photo of his chest for the benefit of the Stooge community. And weirdly, I come to, despite, everything, kind of like these people. That's the
anal topographical signature
that Mark had already figured out with Kenny.
A melancholy Midwest desperation.
Which leads me back to the role of Colin Robinson.
I am what's known as a psychic vampire. Or energy vampire. Energy vampires drain people's energy merely by talking to them.
All the same qualities are here too.
We either bore you or we enrage you.
He's persistent, oddly unflappable.
I'm fine. Just a little fire.
He inserts himself into situations he shouldn't be in and stubbornly stays.
Why are you still here?
He annoys and confuses people.
How's your night been, guys?
It's none of your business.
What?
He can suck the air out of a room in an instant. He's deeply uncool. He makes terrible jokes that fall flat.
I've been experimenting with humor to drain energy. Which reminds me, does anyone here have any updog?
He overshares. He goes on at length about boring things.
The thing with motion smoothing that you have to remember is you want it on for sporting events, but off for TV and movies. Even take a football movie like 1974's The Longest Yard, starring mustachioed actor Burt Reynolds.
He humiliates himself and pathetically shrinks. Sound familiar?
Yes.
But the whole concept of an energy vampire feels like it was reverse engineered from Mark's signature emotional through line and identity.
I spent so much time at the DMV, they finally just gave me a license.
Because it kind of was. In allowing Mark the freedom to improvise the ways in which he drained people made this character what it was. An opportunity Mark had been training for his entire career. Which contributes to why it feels like no one else could do this.
Go to your home screen and look for settings. I don't know what operating system you're running.
Okay, actually, yeah, pretty good. But the very existence of this character and its popularity is a direct affirmation of the choices he made through his entire career. All of the elements of that personal persona that he developed across all of his other characters. Both sort of a meta celebration of or commentary on the power behind his comedic style, and an all-around amazing showcase for it. And I started to notice that it's the exact opposite of his on-cinema character. Perhaps an alternate version of the real Mark. What he worries he would have become were he not to have gone on those morning shows and landed a role on The Office. Because this on-cinema character version of him jumped the gun and moved to LA instead of becoming so undeniable that LA came to him. His character's decision to move to LA and try to make it big ended up in levels of sadness and desperation unheard of in fiction. Instead of playing rewarding roles close to himself that come from what he finds funny, this character becomes a cheap impressionist of other comedians. He receives no recognition, no respect. And so I like this as a metaphor for like the absolute opposite trajectory of what he would imagine his life could have been were he not to have had the confidence in his own talent and identity that he did.
And I needed a key, and this was the doorknob, literally.
Where Colin Robinson as a character celebrates what Mark did do with his career.
When they call you a dumbass, you know you've got them.
On cinema, Mark is what the worst case scenario looks like. They both act the same way. They both have the same traits. But where on cinema Mark struggles to overcome them, Colin Robinson weaponizes them.
TGIF? It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Because this role isn't just written in Mark's comedic language. It literalizes it as a supernatural ability.
Great, go ahead.
Yeah, for the Sigourney Otis project, we got...
How was everyone's weekends?
It's like the more I feed, the more I need.
I've never felt so alive in my life.
It celebrates it as a superpower and also portrays it as a curse. It brings together everything about Mark as a performer and marries it perfectly with the core of his characters. A character that's very funny through a TV screen, but profoundly unfunny and violently boring to the people around him in universe. And there are endearing qualities too, and they come from that same core. The joke is still on him, and it's a cruel existential joke. Because Colin Robinson has a sweetness that comes from the fact that deep down he wants connection.
I've never had anyone in here.
He wants his housemates to like him. He wants friends. But the curse of his existence makes it hard for him because he has to behave in ways that make people not like him.
You know, I think he's pretty lonely.
He may be conflicted about wanting to make a friend or two, but he can't because every friend he makes, he drives them away by draining their life force. So in that way, he's kind of misunderstood. He does want to be friends, but at the same time, he's devouring you.
While Mark's other characters sabotage their social goals out of a lack of self-awareness, Colin Robinson sabotages his social goals out of a nature that he completely understands but can't do anything about. He's unfriendable by existential necessity, and he knows it. And yet, like on Cinema Mark and Kenny, like Nate, like Pryce, he keeps trying. But unlike Pryce ending up the owner of a super sweet laser tag business, Colin Robinson continues to try, knowing even his version of a happy ending is to be at peace with continuing to try forever.
I will continue to sift through it on a daily basis.
Because that's life. While Kenny was, at the end of the day, Mark himself literally trolling people and making them uncomfortable in a really inspired way. So much of his resulting career has been him playing characters that provoke other characters in the same ways. And then comes Colin Robinson, a character that will literally die if he stops bothering people. That language that's unique to Mark, the character itself is written in that language. That
melancholy Midwest desperation
that shaped every character going back to Kenny is written to be represented as a supernatural condition. There's one final really important difference between Colin Robinson and Mark's other characters. Like Mark, not Kenny, going on those morning news shows, Colin Robinson knows.
I don't want to bore him.
We bore you.
He's acutely aware of exactly how his behavior would be perceived, and he acts that way purposefully. Colin Robinson isn't another one of Mark's characters. He's Mark. He humiliates himself purposefully, and he confuses others purposefully, because he has to. It's what gives him life. 16 years ago, Mark was a bored guy in Wisconsin laughing his head off with his friends about the idea of going on a morning show to spread secondhand embarrassment and confusion. That gave him life, and gave him the life he has now. A life in which he just keeps committing to that same deeply rooted bit that he lives for, which continues to be the key to high-level comedy coming out of private inside jokes just to make his friends laugh, which I get the feeling would give him sustenance even if it didn't put him in a position where he can commit to that bit for a living.
He owns a yacht. I know.
That's it. And all this time later, plays a character that embodies his sense of humor literally for living, which is why this character feels so perfect. Even if you're normal and aren't overthinking it ad nauseum like I am, I think it comes through and speaks to why this character is beloved. And if you are thinking about it, the character seems to be written as a celebration of Mark Proksch's career, by turning the qualities that make him so powerful as a comedian into an actual superpower. Anyway, get the heck out of here.
Yummy. Who left this pie here? I think I feel berries.